Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ian Kavat. As a provisional agreement reached between the Philippines and China unraveled almost as soon as it was announced, Manila says it will continue to assert its sovereignty over Second Thomas Shoal in the West Philippine or South China Sea.
We have faced challenges to our territorial sovereignty, and we will assert our rights and interests in the same fair and pacific way that we have always done. The Philippines cannot yield. The Philippines cannot waver. Ang West Philippine Sea ay hindi kathang-isip natin lamang. Ito ay atin. At ito ay mananatiling atin hanggat nag-aalab ang diwa ng ating minamahal na bansang Pilipinas. Pagtitibayin at palalaguin natin ang kamalayan at kaalaman ng buong bansa at titiyakin na maipapasa natin ito sa kabataan at ating susunod na mga salinlahi.
Second Thomas Shoal is a submerged reef lying within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. It's 100 nautical miles west of the Philippines' Palawan Island and more than 500 nautical miles south of China's Hainan Island. Manila says Beijing agreed to drop conditions for the delivery of essentials and medical care to its small contingent on the ship grounded there. Beijing confirmed a deal had been reached, but on three conditions: that the Sierra Madre must be removed, that Manila not transport construction materials to fortify the ship, and must give China advance notice. It added Beijing had the right to inspect resupply vessels. This all comes after a failed June 17th resupply mission in which the Chinese rammed, boarded and confiscated property from a Philippine Navy ship. They used knives and axes in aggressive behaviour that was widely condemned. A Philippine sailor lost his thumb in the incident. We're asking what's next for the Philippines. Joining us today are Zhongji Yu, National Taiwan University Adjunct Assistant Professor, and Wen-Ti Song, Atlantic Council Global China Hub Non-Resident Fellow. Very warm welcome to both of you on the show today.
Thank you.
In a statement on Sunday, July 21st, the Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs said both sides continue to recognise the need to de-escalate the situation in the South China Sea and manage differences through dialogue and consultation, and agree that the agreement will not prejudice each other's positions in the South China Sea. The DFA said that the agreement was reached after a series of careful and meticulous consultations between both sides. They paved the way for a convergence of ideas without compromising national positions. The Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs statement regarding prior notification and on-site confirmation is therefore inaccurate. Wen-Ti, let me come to you first. So what do you make of this disagreement over the agreement?
Well, so little information to go on really at this point. All we know is that some kind of agreement seemed to have been signed. We haven't seen full text of it released by either China or the Philippines. And so without much data to go on, I think we had to go by logic. And logic here is that agreement like this that contain essentially very little information beyond that both sides commit to this idea that it's meant to be de-escalating in purpose. So supposedly something like this should provide some kind of political usage, I think, for the claimants. Between China and Philippines is a smaller power, so naturally you will think Philippines has better faith, better interest in generally making this agreement work, de-escalate tension. For China, it's a bit less clear. We do know that China has interest in minimizing the number of involvements in this dispute over Second Thomas Shoal. And we know that there will be UN General Assembly coming up. There will be the Quad Foreign Ministers meeting coming up very soon, as well as the East Asia Summit. And so naturally, you expect Philippines to be trying to do some alliance building leading up to these regional meetings to try to get more stakeholders onto its side on this bilateral dispute. So perhaps for China at this moment, it's a good idea to come out with a loose, ill-defined agreement to show some gesture of goodwill as a way to diffuse Philippines' alliance-building efforts at these meetings. But China, by Peking, is so ambiguous, is keeping non-binding as subject to China's own constant reinterpretation to its own advantage as well.
Yeah, I mean, the wording, Professor Yu, was interesting from the Chinese side, saying that a deal had been reached, but with the three conditions. And the top condition was to remove the Sierra Madre. I know Wen-Ti spoke about the Philippines essentially being keener to de-escalate. Was that your point? But I cannot see that the Philippines would agree to remove the Sierra Madre. What's your view?
Yes, I think the Sierra Madre actually has been sitting there for so long. Therefore, this is probably the driving force. The United States hope both China and Philippines can refrain from escalating the conflicts.
So what's your view on the disagreement over the agreement? What effect does that have on either escalation or de-escalation? Let's look at the next resupply mission, which I understand should be happening any time soon. Obviously, these troops run out of food and water quite quickly. We do not think that the Philippines would give China the advance notice of this. What sort of effect would that have on China? What do you predict would happen?
Regarding the sovereignty right, it's a zero-sum game. So it's difficult for Philippines to give any advance notice because that means they are compromised and yield their sovereign right to China's side. And China definitely will not, accept, Philippines government continue to provide all these, food supply materials and even try to, internationalize such disputes.
Wunti, just very quickly, does it make you wonder about the so-called gentleman's agreement with Duterte, the new model agreement with Vice Admiral Alberto Carlos, where again the Chinese side said that these individuals agreed to remove the Sierra Madre? Does it cast doubt on all of that?
I think when it comes to something so sensitive as territorial dispute, on which both sides have invested significant political emotions onto, including nationalism emotions, anything that's not written down in black and white, that has broader international support as well as broader domestic consensus building leading up to it, they can be very, very fluid in how much they can hold. And like we see most recently from this example, we see both China and Philippines trying to claim they signed something, but both sides then come away saying the content's very, very different. So that again tells you that gentleman's agreement are a nice thing in theory, but in international politics, maybe you need something a bit more concrete.
Okay. Now, a lot of activity was underway before this agreement was announced, and not just on the diplomatic side. On July 16th, the Philippine and US Coast Guard completed exercises in the waters of Lubang Island, which is about 60 nautical miles southwest of Manila, facing the West Philippine or South China Sea. The exercise simulated search and rescue, medical evacuation, and practice communication, and involved the Philippines, Melcora, Aquino, US cutter Vasha. And in Philippine media, Rear Admiral Roy Vincent Trinidad, a Navy spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea, said that Manila was discussing the possibility of conducting a resupply mission as part of joint allied activities.
The Philippines, together with its allies, has been conducting joint maritime exercises, or what they call the multinational maritime cooperative activity. This has been going on for quite some time now, and we have seen this happening during the Balikatan exercises. For the Philippines, I think the June 17 incident was a wake-up call that no matter our good intention, what our good intentions are, we will continue to be subject to these belligerent activities, these bullying activities by the Chinese Coast Guard and its militia arm. I think the Philippines has agency to explore as much options, and part of this is to have its allies join joint maritime patrols, and specifically resupply and rotation operations for the BRP Sierra Madre.
And at the Aspen Security Conference in Colorado, Jake Sullivan didn't go as far as agreeing to joint US-Philippine resupplies, but he said the US would do everything in its power to support them.
We have tried to consult very closely with the Philippines because these are decisions they should lead on. How to most effectively reprovision this ship so that the sailors on board have the food and water and other provisions they need to continue to fulfill their mission. And we will do what is necessary with the Philippines to see to it that that happens. But in terms of specific concepts of operations or the exact way in which the United States would be engaged, our preference is to have the maintenance of the status quo there, the capacity of the Philippines to do these resupplies. We will continue to support the Philippines and stand behind them as they take steps to be able to ensure that. And I will be very cautious about speaking about hypotheticals should we have to get to it.
Professor Yu, what do you think was the effect of all this?
I think Sullivan seems send out a very contradictory statement. On the one side, he affirmed the United States will continue to support Philippines to operate its reply mission on the Second Thomas Shoal. But on the other hand, it seems United States will not hold any joint patrols with the Philippine government at this moment.
What he said was it's too early to, or that he wouldn't want to speculate on hypotheticals.
Yeah. So at this moment, I think the signals is quite confusing. But from my perspective, I believe this is a goodwill gesture sent toward China in order to maintain good, kind of friendly or negotiable atmosphere among the trilateral sides.
China is worried about the US getting involved, or the US allies.
China is also worried about, because they criticize Philippine government in internationalize the disputes between both sides, and also criticize United States is organizing the mini NATO. So on China's calculation, they are worried about the tension escalation.
Okay. Yeah. So, Wanti, let's talk about the manifestation of that concern. And also, I'd like to get your view on the Philippine strategy of assertive transparency. There's, you could say that there's some pressure on that strategy to deliver something. So people are watching very closely about how China acts, whether it will step back or whether it will keep pushing forward.
I mean, on the China side, I think it's almost straightforward to say that China's negotiating strategy, and we go back to people like Solomons, for example, who were working on U.S.-China relations in the 70s, that China has a mentality whereby they like to play, in diplomacy, they like to play single round games as opposed to multiple round games. But the notion is that if you play multiple round game, if you interact with somebody, do business together for many, many times, then presumably reputation is important for maintaining a good working relationship in the longer term. But on the other hand, if you like to play single round games, then for each round of interaction, it's sort of, you're most likely to get maximum concessions if you act with uncertainty, if you project greater fear onto your adversary and generally keep your adversary on their toes. That's how you may be able to elicit greatest amount of concession. And so I think that gives China reasons to try to be unpredictable and sometimes in terms of their gentleman agreement, less than completely dependable sometimes. And that you then throw into the concerns about nationalism, how bureaucrats may have incentive to err on the side of caution. Caution in this sense means firm and tough on foreign countries. That makes the situation very, very tension-ridden.
So what's your view on essentially what's at the hub of this assertive transparency debate, which is, does China care about reputation, reputational costs?
China should care, but the bureaucrats who run it may be going through so many issues in terms of interagency coordination, in terms of compartmentalization of information across agencies, also between civilian leadership, that may be foreign ministry, as well as China's paramilitary coast guards on the other hand, that to be able to come up with a more graceful approach befitting of a superpower like China may be difficult for mid-level Chinese bureaucrats running the show on a day-to-day basis. So too often for mid-level bureaucrats, when they want political cover, be they civilian or military, best way to get cover is to act tough towards foreign countries. And it's like that line from Planet of the Apes, extremism in defense of apes is no vice. Or some would say, like Barry Goldwater, extremism in defense of liberty is no vice. That, again, always provides an incentive for bureaucrats to act tougher towards foreigners. And act tough when you're already the biggest country in the region may not buy you that many friends. Oftentimes, grace wins you more friends.
Okay. For the first time, the Philippines is taking part in multinational war games overseas. Australia's exercise Pitch Black 2024 involves 16 Indo-Pacific and European countries, more than 140 aircraft and more than 4,000 personnel. Manila is also ordering up to 20 multi-role fighter jets to upgrade its existing fleet and is using the Australian drills as the opportunity to train its pilots. Wanti, I wonder whether I could come to you. So, how significant do you think it is that the Philippines is going overseas for these drills for the very first time?
I mean, it's definitely a positive sign for the Philippines' regional engagement for sure, and it's also maybe a potentially useful but politically less sensitive way for the Philippines to send a signal to China. Hey, we get along with people, we get friends, we may be Philippines may be dealing with China alone at the moment, but Philippines is actually not alone. It's got friends, be it US, Australia, and other regional partners whose potential assistance are sort of looming like a specter in the background. And so Philippines is challenging China. This could escalate. I can have more potential partner that could stepping on my side, but Philippines doing it in a way that's not so direct, hinting at potential increase in capability, but says nothing about direct intention to use that capability on China anytime soon. So I think this is how in diplomacy you send a subtle signal to try to have the cake and eat it too.
So you don't think it's that the Air Force will actually play a role to deter China over the South China Sea?
I mean, for South China Sea, such a complicated strategic landscape, one would imagine any kind of military asset could potentially come into use. And exactly what combination of military asset that gets deployed each time obviously depends on the situation. But the broader message, I think, is that Philippines is trying to tell people we have the resources, the friends, and we are increasingly building the kind of familiarity with the faces and the process of other regional stakeholders who have interest in preserving freedom of navigation and overflight in the area, including areas near South China Sea.
Okay. Now, moving back to the Coast Guard, this time Taiwan's, China has slammed reported joint Coast Guard search and rescue drills between Taiwan and Japan. It urged Japan not to disturb Taiwan Strait peace and stability and Sino-Japanese relations and to, quote, refrain from conniving or supporting so-called Taiwan independence. Agence France-Presse had reported the exercise in the waters south of Chiba Prefecture in Japan. However, when Taiwan talks reached out to Taiwan's Coast Guard administration, they said their vessel was doing routine fishery patrols, which help protect Taiwanese fishers, and only seeking replenishment in Japan. They said this practical cooperation was part of an MOU signed in 2017 between the exchange associations of Taiwan and Japan. Now, in July, Vietnam submitted its third proposal to extend its continental shelf beyond its 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone. So far, Beijing and Taipei have lodged a formal complaint in response. In June, the Philippines also applied to the United Nations to extend its continental shelf off Palawan Island. And it seems that this proposal would cover the Spratly Islands. A number of claimants have lodged protests. A country has the right to explore and exploit the resources contained in its continental shelf and curb the activity of other countries. Wanti, let me come to you. So Taiwan has also lodged a protest against both Vietnam and the Philippines submissions. How can we reconcile Taiwan's position? I mean, Taiwan, we know, supports the Philippines, works on many different layers with the Philippines, condemns the aggression that China has shown towards the Philippines, and yet the RSC has the same claim, and it feels that it needs to publicly back that up.
Right. I mean, there's a few ways to tackle this certainly hot potato question for sure. I think there is a distinction to be drawn between principle and protocol. I think it's definitely consistent for Taiwan to be saying, while Taiwan does also have some claim to the jurisdiction that it may have dispute with other regional actors, those behavior on the part of some regional great powers that may be in violation of what some may see as basic decency in terms of international behavior, Taiwan is still against those things. So I think that's one way to tackle it. Another way to tackle it is to say that Taiwan's current government is also in somewhat of a delicate spot when it comes to how to manage Taiwan's sovereignty claims in the region. We know that Taiwan's official name today is called Republic of China, and part and parcel of that means that Taiwan's polity inherits some of the historical claims to waters in South China Sea. Now,
In fact, the original 11-dash line.
yes, that goes back like a century or so ago, so a long time ago. And the thing with the current Taiwan government is that while the current Taiwan government may be in favor of building a more Taiwanese-oriented identity, it also is not in a position where it can safely discard all those Republic of China-based historical claims as well.
Yeah.
Because the second it does that, the second Taiwan's government discards those historical-based claims, Beijing will be saying, see, it's Taiwan government, again, trying to desensitize, trying to remove the Chineseness from Taiwan's society and polity, and therefore it's Taiwan being provocative again towards China.
Not just being provocative, but then they would assert that this is, separatist, pro-independence, trying to split the country, which obviously is highly sensitive.
Presumably that's what Beijing's most likely knee-jerk reaction is going to be if Taiwan gives out all those claims straightforward. So oftentimes you see Taiwan's government pay some kind of commitment to the claim without really making it front and center. And certainly for Taiwan, which already has a huge China security threat to manage, Taiwan is no in position, nor does Taiwan have much interest in pursuing its claim in South China Sea with much real vigor.
Yeah, and to be fair, it seems that the players in the region also accept that they treat Taiwan not as an aggressor, in the same way as China. And in fact, Vietnam also has the same claims. It claims the entire Paracels, is that correct? And also the entire Spratlys under its own historical claim. So meanwhile, China and Russia completed their joint Sea 2024 exercises in the seas and skies near Guangdong, the South China Sea, and in the Philippine Sea. A total of 7 ships were deployed to rehearse anti-submarine exercises in the South China Sea involving the detection and destruction of an enemy submarine. Now, while China's aircraft carriers were not part of this exercise, the Shandong had exercised in the South China Sea in June. Now, Philippine Rear Admiral Trinidad has suggested Beijing still needs decades to refine its aircraft carrier warfare capabilities. Professor Yu, what do you make of that comment? Do you agree with him?
Yeah, I think Admiral Trinidad is exposing China's aircraft carriers vulnerability is a very smart move. If you want to win the combat, you need to identify center of gravity. The definition of center of gravity, that means the source of the power or the strength that enables military force to achieve its objectives, and is also what an opposing force, can orient its action to against that, lead to enemy's failure. So in this case, China's, PRA's center of gravities is Navy, and Navy's center of gravities is its aircraft carrier. This year's RIMPAC exercise U.S. demonstrate how to sink the 40,000 tons of the monster ships to demonstrate United States and its allies have such capability to destroy China's center of gravities that can create to deter China's initiating a war. But on the other hand, we are also very interested to know that China's also conducted the joint exercise with the Russian navies, conducted a so-called joint anti-submarine kind of exercise. And for United States, if we take a look back to the CSIS last year's war game, attack nuclear power submarine is the center of gravities of the United States. Therefore, they demonstrate both Russia and Japan also have such capability to detect and destroy United States central gravities. So it's very, I think, it's pinpoint to counter check United States such kind of a military capability demonstration. And we also know that in the futures conflict scenarios, the more delay the United States attack submarines come to Taiwan's aid, the more likely China they can have a better chance to win the war. So this kind of joint exercise, held in this moment, I believe, to a great extent, they want to demonstrate to counterweight each other's kind of military capabilities.
Taking in point, very final question, Wonti. So taking that into account, the idea of the delay and how much damage or how much of a threat China and Russia joint forces can be, given that Russia does have that presence in the northern part of this region?
Well, I think for Russia, it's still going to take quite some time until they have the excess capability to use it meaningfully in the Indo-Pacific theaters, given how much they are still in the quagmire on the European front over the Ukraine-Russia war. And I think Russia and China, they are coalitions of convenience. When it comes to real warfare situation, whether that level of coherence and cohesion can last or not, I think is still a big question. I can see how Putin visited China relatively recently, and Putin also made a visit to a PLA Navy's academy somewhere in northeast China, so I can see how this is a natural follow-on from that visit. Whether that's going to mean that much policy substance, especially in true conflict adjacent scenarios, a lot remains to be observed.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Zhongji Yu and Wonti Song for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.